Now we are joined by Jen Hogan. Good morning, Jen.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Very well. People know you as a columnist in the Irish Times and also from the parenting blog Mamitude. You wrote a really interesting piece about should School Sports Day be non-competitive, and this is a big topic for a lot of parents at present because parents go in with a lot of stress into school sports days and the children go in as well with stress, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, this is for us this year was the first year that we had a non-competitive sports day, and normally kind of in the lead up, I suppose, of a couple of kids who are big into their sports, really competitive, really focused and hoping, to win a medal, and have others then really are completely indifferent to the whole thing. And then I suppose it's like most families, there's even one or two children who aren't overly keen on the whole idea of sports day. It's great to get that day off school or a day away from the classroom, but they're maybe a bit aware, a little bit self-aware maybe of their own kind of limitations on the sports pitch. But this year our school made this move towards a non-competitive sports day, and I wasn't aware of it in advance. And when I went along, it was really the parents who were grumbling. They were the people on the sidelines who were saying, "Oh, well, that's why we don't have a major dad presence this year," which we normally do. But I think I pointed out in the article my column was more to do with the fact that we were spread out in different locations, and it was probably a lot to do with that. It kind of made logistics a bit more difficult. But the non-competitive sports day went down a treat, even with my very competitive children. In fact, they didn't even reference it. And I think a lot of that came from the fact because I didn't reference it. I think we are kind of the big leaders there. And there was no, I've been on the sidelines of sports days for so long. And I see some of the parents kind of losing the plot nearly on the side, roaring at the kids to come along.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a fun day. We need to get our kids active. We know this. We have a childhood obesity epidemic. It's so important that we get our kids active and enjoying sport. And the way to do that is to make it an enjoyable experience and not an experience that some kids feel excluded from, because not every kid has the same ability. And even, taking things a little bit further than that, in terms of inclusivity, if we look at classes, statistics tell us that in every classroom there will be at least two children who have some additional needs. So to go and put them then out in a very public forum, I suppose, they're out there in front of all the parents, in front of all the peers, and maybe
let me ask
display their challenges.
Yeah, let me ask you, Jen, before we go into a bit more on this. How do you do a non-competitive sports day? Like, what activities did the children do?
That's what was really interesting. Some parts of it were very like the old traditional sports day. There were races that weren't races, and it was very cleverly designed. It was very much about teamwork. That was the big thing. They had all the different children in teams. The guys didn't get to pick what team they were on. They were in blue teams or red teams, but they didn't get a choice. So I'm assuming that the teachers, having insight into their abilities of PE and stuff, put a mixed kind of ability team together. And they were positioned, say, even in the relay, that they were kind of running in a diagonal diamond. It's a hard way to describe it. It was more like more diamond. So the boys couldn't measure themselves against each other almost. It was very cleverly done, but they were all still following the same tradition of, right, when the whistle goes, we run and we go to and fro. But they were all kind of cheering each other on. So they couldn't tell that maybe Johnny on one side wasn't racing as far as on the other. They couldn't actually do that. So there was no pressure even coming to the boys. It was literally just constant encouragement. And there were activities like that. They also had games. They brought in things like rounders, and they had different games. There was a different element to it. There was even they hired a bouncy castle with a resistance thing. It sounds a bit like a fun day, but it was actually still done very much in a sports manner, but it was just done where everybody was enjoying themselves and trying to do their own personal best.
Are you, Jen, against competitive sports? Like, obviously, if somebody gets involved in a GA club or any kind of a soccer team or any kind of competitive sports, they do it because you'd hope they're doing it out of choice, that they're not being forced into reliving their failed parents' dreams.
That's it, exactly. I mean, like, you're going to see that on the competitive sports. A lot of my kids play competitive sports. I've some who shy away from it. I try to involve them in sports whatever way they want. I am a sports nut. I love competitive sports, and I played them myself when I was younger. So I do see the value in competitive sports. I just don't believe Sports Day is the time for it or the place for it. And I have been on again the sports pitch. I think I referenced one parent who was shouting at his 8-year-old, "Get into him, killer!" Like, that's really not the sort of encouragement. And that's kind of mild, mild in comparison to what you can hear on the sideline. But parents actually lose the plot and reliving, as you said there, reliving their own childhood through their kids. But competitive sports, with the right support, it absolutely teaches our kids so many important lessons. hard work, about, I suppose, learning to become a gracious loser, about, getting back something on teamwork, about if it's a team sport, about there's lots of different life lessons to be learned from competitive sports. But the first thing we need to do is actually get our kids involved in them.
Yes.
And you can even see in a lot of the clubs, a lot of the competitive sports, that they're even taking this slightly different approach, which I've only realised, I think, since the sport. It was so subtle, I hadn't realised it. The athletics clubs, they're letting children be involved in the competitive races if they want to, but the actual training and the ordinary days are very much about each child improving themselves. The GAL blitzes are the same. It's all very much about letting the score maybe isn't being kept. They're not keeping count, but at the end of the day, obviously, if the kids they're doing that themselves, but they're doing it. It's kind of like it's age appropriate. So it's getting our kids active, getting our kids, giving them a love of sport, and stopping this situation where the children who are weaker at it shy away from it or decide not to get involved at all because they won't get picked. Because if it stays competitive at a very, very young age, it's going to exclude children. And the same goes for sports day. It disheartens children if they never have a chance.